The Thrones of the Tide midi set barely did anything to shake up the meta, but with the most recent balance patches that we've had, things are pretty shaken up since the Demon Hunter and Warrior meta. So let's see what the top 5 best decks are post-patch. Before we begin, I just want to say that these decks that I'll be going over will be 5 of the best meta decks that are available, and then 5 other fun decks that can maybe get you to Legend if you play them very effectively. But let's go ahead and go over the top 5 best decks, and this is not in any particular order, but it is definitely worth saying that Demon Hunter, Fel Demon Hunter in particular, is still one of the best decks to be played right now. I think that that running Carrier is just way too slow at the moment, it being at 7 mana. The high roll is just really not worth it, so I'm going to go ahead and disenchant her off for this video because I don't care about this card, and I highly doubt that it's going to see much play in any other deck in the future unless we get more demon support. But I mean, 1 Bone Glaive seems like, you know, the right amount of burst damage in place of Carrier because you really are not going to get the scam all too frequently. If anything, it's just better to play Sigil and then hit the Slag for 6 mana to get the same effect. But regardless, this deck really hasn't changed all too much, except now people are in agreement that Metamorphin is apparently good enough now because going for a 1-mana 3/4 actually works in this meta because there's not that much control running around. There's not that many ways of being able to deal with multiple threats over the course of multiple turns. So that's the reason why this card has made such a gigantic comeback, where before I could not suggest running this card at all. We could still run Battle-Worn Vanguard without a problem, even though it did get hit. It does prevent Demon Hunter from being as lethal as it used to be and doesn't snowball as many games, but this card is still worth it, especially if you pair it up with multi-strike. But like I said, Demon Hunter really isn't all that different, except for 1 core card. Blade Master Okani, I believe, should go in every single Fel Demon Hunter if you don't already have it. So make sure that you have this card in your deck, because you're going to want to, like, counter your turn 4 opponent's plays, like if they have a minion that can threaten you. Like, Okani could just be a great way to solo games in the mid-game. This next deck is probably debatably the best deck available to be playing right now, and I believe this is going to be the best version for you to play. Senna was able to reach rank 1 legend with this deck, and I'll be sure to include a screenshot right here in order to let you guys know that this deck is very legitimate, because when I first saw the one Garden's Grace, I thought this was probably not all in. I'm trying to like go in on Smite, but it turns out this deck is like good enough with just 1 Garden's Grace, and I feel like with all of the mages that you're seeing around on the ladder right now, you really don't want to give your opponent any more possibilities of a turn of a 0 mana card. But to be honest, that matchup just really isn't good for you if they have a bunch of amulet value anyway, so I digress on that point. But in any case, Holy Paladin does feel very, very good. All of these minions have their purposes, even the 1 copy of Mimrodon, where I said earlier this expansion that this card probably wouldn't see too much play, but now that card draw is not that detrimental, like meaning if you draw throughout most of your deck, it's actually really good for you, versus in like the control mirrors, you really didn't want to draw cards because then you'd be taking fatigue faster. Now this is really the only like major control deck outside of like a couple of other classes. Paladin really can use this card effectively in order to, against the aggro decks, find its qualities, find its other bits of removal. Other than that, this deck is pretty much the same. Cariel being 8 mana really does not change how good the card is. It's still absolutely core because it halves the damage, and if your opponent doesn't have a Viper, then it's just going to be a huge obstacle to overcome throughout the entire game. You still have Holy Mackie rolls in order to give you those insane pop-off turns, Light Rays in order to give you board if you need them. Like, this deck just feels like it has absolutely everything. The biggest challenge with this deck is being patient enough to where you don't play too many cards all at once, and then suddenly it's an uphill battle for you to gain back the board, because this deck can fight for board somewhat consistently. Don't forget about your Alliance Bannermans buffing up your minions to make them even bigger threats. And this deck just feels like it has a little bit of everything, going for board and going for pressure when you want to go for those big smite turns because of your Cariel and because of your Righteous Defense combinations. So Holy Paladin feels like the best deck to be playing right now in a meta where Warrior is just absolutely deleted off the face of the map. And up next, we actually have the counter to Holy Paladin, Cursed Warlock. Cursed Warlock is also very good against Control Shaman, which has been making a lot of comeback with the Murloc package. It's also on this list, so it'll be coming up right next. But in any case, this deck is really good against a lot of the other decks that have popped up in Top 1000 Legend. This might be a little bit more difficult if you're playing this deck towards your Legend climb, but if you're already in Legend and you're seeing a lot of Paladins, if you're seeing a lot of Shamans, if you're seeing a lot of control decks that are very slow, even some of the Warriors that are still that are still sticking around, this deck is very, very good. Not to mention that its rogue matchup is absolutely amazing. It's part of the reason why this deck was played to begin with when rogue was very, very popular, because being able to deal with being able to deal with boats, big boards, you have everything that you need in order to, you know, deal with the large minion with silences. You have ways of being able to counteract free Shaman, which is the main reason why this deck is just so good against Shaman. It has every single counter to it imaginable. We don't even play we don't even play Mutanus in this deck anymore, just due to the fact that you're always going to be adding cards to your opponent's hand that's eventually going to get a mill anyway. So, like, being able to eat a minion in hand really just doesn't help when you're building up the curse value with the Tamsin, with the, oh god, where is he? With the brand combos, with your cultists and whatnot. This deck also has the Queen Ashara in order to give itself high rolls, even more so with the Tamsin, because if you have, let's say you've already played Queen on turn 5 and you have the Ring on turn 7 available, and you have Tamsin and, let's see, where is it? Dragged Below. There you go. And you have Dragged Below down in your hand, then suddenly that is 4 curses that you're putting into your opponent's hand all at once. Depending on how many that you've stacked, that's a lot of damage that's going to stick around. And on turn 7 of all turns, your opponent is not going to be able to play all the curses, and is not going to be encouraged to play all the curses, because then it's their turn 7 and they've just completely passed it up to you. So this deck has a lot of ways of being like, haha, there's no way that my opponent can win, and then, oh, wait a minute, my opponent just gave me all of these curses and I'm dead in 2 turns. Warlock has a very sneaky way of being able to win, so that's why it's got lots of healing and lots of removal in order to buy itself a lot of time. I don't really think that this list can be changed a whole lot, and I do believe that Queen does give you those high rolls in order to beat those very, very fringe matchups that might need a little bit of a boost. But in any case, Curse Warlock stonks went massively up thanks to this patch. Next up is Control Murloc Shaman. This is the only deck that I have been enjoying in this metagame right now. And honestly, there's a good reason for it, because it has lots of different ways of being able to be played. It's not just all about being able to go for the Mutanus, even though that is your primary win con. If you can pair it up with with a Brand or with a Bolner combination of cards, it's absolutely game breaking. If you can, like, say, eat a Kazakhstan from a Druid, if you can eat Cultist cards from the Warlock, even though that matchup's absolutely abysmal. Mutanus is going to be the way that you win your unfavorables, but unfortunately, you do have to set it up, and there are some decks that are just way faster than you. But there are decks like Demon Hunter to where you are favored against them, because you have cards like Schooling in order to deal with their early game. Obviously, Wildpaw Cavern can absolutely solo Demon Hunter because of the freeze aspects, but this deck is kind of the bane of a lot of aggro and tempo decks at the moment, due to the fact that this deck can fight for board, my guy. Like, oh man, Clownfish, absolute MVP from this mini set. I know that I said at the beginning of the video the mini set did not do much in order to change the meta, but this card gave Shaman so much more playability, and I love it for it. We also have a Farsight in this deck, which is a bit of a recent inclusion thanks to Dead Draw, who did reach rank 1 legend with this deck. Probably should have started with that, but regardless, I absolutely love this deck. It's the only deck that I can have any fun with, because we also get to play Firemancer Flurgle, and I get to tell people that he's not bait. There's been a lot of situations, especially when you have your Bolner out. You have Bolner into Clownfish into Firemancer Flurgle with Amalgams to find you even more Murlocs. So you might even have a situation where you deal upwards of 5 damage, potentially even 6, depending on your board space, with just the Flurgle by himself and mana cheating. So, like I said, this deck has a lot of different ways of being able to be played. Macaw just absolutely does everything you need it to, from being another discount with Clownfish, to being another board freeze, to being another Mutanus pull with Brand combinations. Like, this deck really does feel like it has everything in order to fight the meta decks right now. You have the freezes against the aggro decks, you have the Mutanus against the combo decks and the control decks that you need to outvalue, and there's a lot of different ways of just being able to pressure a lot of a decent amount of damage with, like, School Teachers and Brakan giving you those amazing burst combos. So trust me when I say this is the most fun deck to be playing right now in Standard, and I would highly recommend it because it's the only deck I can seem to enjoy at all. Last but certainly not least, it is the bane of everyone's existence on ladder right now. If you're in top 1000 legend, it is Big Spell Mage. A lot of people have thought that Habu Gabu has unleashed the devil onto ladder, and I think that this deck is absolutely fine in terms of, like, play experience, like play style pattern. Like, I think that this deck is fine, except for the situations where you coin Belinda on turn 4 and then you play your turn 5 spell. I think that is a little bit egregious, and I'm just now realizing that this art is slightly off. So come on, Blizzard, let's get our stuff together now. But in any case, I think that this deck is just absolutely nuts. This may not be the best 30-card list that Habu Gabu has decided on. This is the most recent list that I saw from a couple of days ago, but he's streamed since then, so he might have made a few changes, but I still think that this list is still very well put together. You could even, like, take out a watch post and put in Varden if you want, like, a board freeze. There's the situation to be said where you can put, like, Mordresh or Spammy Arcanist in here. If you're, Mordresh is more so for the mirror if you're fighting a lot of mages, but Spammy Arcanist, obviously, if you're fighting a lot of aggro, you might need tools in order to beat up on them. The main way that this deck wins, though, outside of having Belinda high rolls, is just Rune of the Archmage and Drakefire Amulet being absolutely god tier when they high roll. Obviously, Rune can do everything from clearing to building boards to giving you armor with Ice Barrier, which is probably the most powerful secret you can get out of this, on all honesty. Being able to get any sort of health regeneration in Mage is absolutely crucial. But, like, the one thing I really liked about the inclusion of Varden was, so on turn 10, you can play, like, Parrot, pull out Amulet, and then play Varden. Or if you already have a big board on the field anyway, you just freeze it, and then you don't have to worry about your opponent. But there are a lot of people playing Starfish, so I understand why Habu would cut this from his list. But in any case, I think that this list is fine if you're just wanting to take it from the lower ranks, getting into Diamond. Once you hit the Diamond Legend ranks, you're going to be seeing this deck a lot more frequently, so beware of the mirror, because the mirror takes a lot of finesse and a few mistakes in order to really master. But I'm fine with this deck being in existence. I don't hate it as much as I dislike a lot of the other archetypes right now. But Big Spell Mage definitely is a real meta deck and is debatably the top 5 best decks in the meta right now because of how consistently it high rolls. But let's go ahead and talk about 5 other decks that you could use on your Legend climb that I believe would be better if you are not currently in Legend. The other decks you could play to your way to Legend, but these are the most popular decks that we've seen so far in Legend. So I'm going to go ahead and give you guys some other ways of being able to climb in case those lists do not appeal to you, or if you'd rather just play a different deck in general. And here is probably debatably the best rogue deck that is not Mind Rogue right now. I think that this deck, the only reason why more people aren't playing it is because of the amount of scams that are possible, and this deck just doesn't really do that well against Mage because of all the 0 mana cards that they have readily available in their hand. You'd absolutely hate for a Shadow Step to be 10 mana of all cards. Finally, Shadow Step is balanced, I guess. But the way that this deck wins is usually just by early vessel turns, getting prep value, being able to dredge it from the bottom of your deck, creating essentially 12-12 in stats all at once. And you still have plenty of ways of being able to play the Null very quickly. Lots of damage potential with, like, Krakatoa burst spells and pirate combinations. You have Scabs as a reset button and as a way to make your Edwin combos even larger. And most importantly, you have Peasant. I think that any rogue right now, maybe the exclusion of Mind Rogue, always wants to be playing Peasant right now, due to the fact that if you play this on turn 1, it is an immediate threat. If you're going up against a Shaman and they have coin, they have to play Schooling into coin Piranha in order to deal with this. You've already gotten rid of the coin, so that is some value that you've generated yourself just by taking a turn 1 that automatically gives you so much value. So I would highly suggest running Peasant in your deck if you haven't already. This card is absolutely a game breaker for Rogue, but the biggest issue with Rogue right now is the fact that it's not that great into Holy Paladin, it's not that good into Curse Warlock, it's pretty decent against Shaman and against the other tempo decks that exist right now, but if you're fighting a hardcore control deck or something like Mage that aims to scam a lot, sadly, Rogue just isn't as powerful as it used to be. Next up is probably the strongest deck that's going to be in these next 5 lists, but I believe that Naga Priest is an archetype that people are not exploring, and they're just not getting. I don't know why. They don't want to win, I guess. I think the real reason why people don't want to play this deck is because the play pattern is very, very linear. You just, if you get Wig, you have a pretty cool game on your hands. If you don't get Wig, it's like you're playing a bad arena deck kind of thing. It's just, right now, a lot of the decks have this issue where one card is the main way that you can even enjoy the deck right now. And this is a prime example to where if you don't draw Wig, you just don't get to play the game of Hearthstone because it's not what your deck was designed to do. It doesn't work if you don't hit Wig. Rune Mage doesn't work if you don't cheat out the rune or cheat out the dragons. Fel Demon Hunter doesn't work if it doesn't have literally all the cards that it has in it. Maybe that one's a bad example. But you get my point about like the one card being so vital to a deck's win rate that a lot of people just don't want to play this archetype. But I still believe that this is probably one of the best pressure decks that we have, and probably one of the highest skill cap decks that's available right now. One of the only reasons why I'm not playing it is because I know that I throw games with it, and Priest isn't really my strong suit. But I still think this deck is amazing. When you see high legend players pilot this deck, it's absolutely unreal the amount of pressure that you feel from them to where every single minion, even if it has 1 HP, is a legitimate threat. So I would say that this deck is very much a legitimate threat that is being very underutilized right now, just because it seems that people just don't want to play it. I can't believe this deck actually made the list, but Murloc Shaman has had stats way too good to ignore on the way to Legend. Once it starts to hit like Diamond 5 Legend ranks, it's a little bit harder for this deck to gain some gas unless you're getting only the good matchups. Like for example, if you're fighting the Mage deck, this is probably one of the best ways of being able to beat them, just because consistent aggro decks are going to usually beat Mage, because if you win by turn 5, they can't scam you. But regardless, Murloc Shaman has been doing amazing on every single level of Hearthstone, except for when you get to about the Diamond ranks. So if you're just now starting the game, if you want a quick and easy aggro deck to where you don't have to do too much thinking, you can just play Murlocs, just go Murloc and just hit in the face, this is the deck for you. Very, very simple, very, very straightforward. The only thing that's really worth noting is, I guess, the inclusion of Brakan. I really don't feel like you're going to play this card all too often, but in situations to where you just need 6 more damage against an aggro deck, and you have stalled them enough, maybe this can work out. One thing that is very, very crucial, though, in many ways that I have lost as the Murloc Control Shaman, is your utilization of the board as well as your utilization of Lushwater Scout. There's been several situations to where I froze 5, even 6 Murlocs from the enemy Murloc Shaman, and this was on the field while they had minions in hand, so they were just able to kill off the freeze minions somewhat effectively, especially if they have a war leader that I froze, and I'm pretty sure in the situation that I'm referencing, they did have a war leader. So the rush can be very, very surprising, and this deck, every single time I fight it, tends to surprise me just a little bit more, because I underevaluate this deck. I underestimate it every single time I fight it, and then when it wins, I literally can't believe it. But I think that this is a good archetype for anybody that's just looking for some fast games in Hearthstone and you don't want to play Mind Rogue. This just seems to be the best way to get the fastest Legend climb. The next deck is a deck that I can't believe that I'm actually recommending to people, but I believe I am going to start playing this deck a little bit, because big beasts always catch my eye when it comes to hunter decks, and this is probably the best way to be playing any kind of big beast hunter right now, because it's actually got an aggro package in order to help support it. One thing I think this deck has on HS Replay is 2 copies of School Teacher, and I'm not really sure how much I feel about this particular list. The reason why, you need early game removal. If you just don't have a harpoon gun and you're just relying on your turn 4s, I feel like there's a lot of ways that this can fail. And just like kind of looking over like some of the Hunter 3-drops, like it's going to be kind of weird because of how I have this angle, but like you have Animal Companion, Deadly Shot, Conscious Call as some of them. Aim Shot, I guess, is pretty good if you hit it. Quick Shot, Doggy Biscuit. Dumblar Dunker is really bad. I guess you have Secrets as well. But like the thing I really don't like about School Teacher is that if we just put in Quick Shots, we just have removal for early game turns where we don't have our turn 1, or even if we do have our turn 1, then suddenly we have a 2-3 and we can potentially get a double trade. But I also like Quick Shot for the value of the Barak Kodabane that we have in deck, because you're kind of encouraged to play Doggy Biscuit on curve. And there are some situations to where trading it can be good in order to give a minion rush, but it's always just good in order to have extra 2-drops, and I just particularly in this meta find Hunter very easy to lack card draw as well. So there are situations to where maybe you can play this for some card draw value very late stage. I don't know. That might be a little bit of a stretch because of how high the mana cost of this deck is, but I don't know. I just think that Quick Shot just seems a little bit better. I'll be sure to leave a list with the school teacher, but just know that this deck could probably be changed a few cards around, but like the one Saber seems really, really good, so that way you don't use your Sunken Saber to pull out this Saber. It would be really, really bad value because of the really big beast you have in your deck. You just want to high roll the Hydrogen, the Bear, and the King Crush every single time off of this and not just hit the same minion. It's also the same reason why we're not playing Battle Ram, because you don't want this card to summon Battle Ram. Same thing with your Pet Collectors. Pet Collector is just going to be used in order to bring out your Saber as well as the Sunken Saber in case you don't have your Harpoon Gun value. So that's the main reason why we're running one of these and two of these. But just know that the deck, this deck is just very, very tight, to where you're not going to have that much room in order to make changes, to where I think that the school teacher change is really the only thing you can do to this deck. Like, Devouring Swarm is a great way. This card has scammed me with Hydrogen several times. You can get extra copies of your Shaman Saber. You also have Revive Pet in order to give you more Saber, so that's another reason you don't need to run two. So I think that this deck is very interesting. I just don't know what the best 30-card list is, so just take it with a grain of salt. And the last deck on this list is Bomb Rogue. Oh my, then I feel like this deck being on this list is very telling of what the Hearthstone meta feels like to play in right now. Because unfortunately, this deck just has one direction, and when it works, it just absolutely feels terrible to go up against. But you can't deny the power of what happens when you deal 24 damage with literally 2 Forsaken Lieutenants and a Naval Mine that dies to the Shatter Shambler when you already have a Snowfall graveyard on the field. Like, it's just absolutely ridiculous the snowballing this deck can do. And if your opponent doesn't know how to play around it, there are lots of ways to where you're just gonna win more games than you're supposed to. Like, the big thing of what I mean here is that a good person, when they know, a good player, when they know they're going up against a Bomb Rogue, they're not going to play that many minions because they know that your combo is very dependent on being able to trade your Forsaken Lieutenants. Like, if you're going up against a Paladin, for example, just forget it. They're almost never going to play anything to where you're going to get this value, so you have to go for, like, some kind of OTK. And that's where this deck can be a little bit interesting. Sometimes it's not just, combo them as fast as possible. It's about build up the 30 damage combo and then kill them. Because if you use up all of your damage before they die and they heal, then there's just no way that you can that you can seal the deal. But I think that this deck being meta does kind of say a lot about the meta and how a lot of people either seem to really enjoy it because they like playing Bomb Rogue, or they don't enjoy it because they're losing to Bomb Rogue. Not saying that Bomb Rogue is like the best deck and like the most common thing you're going to be seeing. I'm just using it as an example to where this deck does its thing and you're happy about it, or you go up against it and then it's the worst experience half the time because there's literally nothing you could have done against it. So I think that Bomb Rogue can be good if you're going for a very fast legend climb, but I literally couldn't break a 50% with this deck. Granted, it was at the high legend ladder, so there's a lot more people that are willing to counter this as well as know how to counter this. But if you're going for just your legend climb and you're like a starting player, I think this is a very good list for you to invest your dust into. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I say that was the last deck? No, because I'm going to give you guys a bait deck to see if we can't get a good archetype for this, because I woke up with this very urgent need to build this deck. It's absolute garbage. I'll just go ahead and tell you, but there's maybe some changes that we can make to where maybe we can make Elwyn Boar Hunter into a legitimate deck. All I really tried to do was just play big beast cards and then take out the big beasts and then put in Elwyn Boar and try to make like cards to help support it. I don't think that this is... I literally have not won a game with this deck yet. I've played it like 3 times so far. Once in ranked and twice in casual. It just has not worked. Because, if you don't get the perfect draws, which I don't even know what are the perfect draws yet, there's just no way that you're going to be able to assemble the combo. But the idea of this deck is that you have Canine Tron in order to help you pull out your 1-drops, but, you need to play Devouring Swarm with at least, 3 boars. It's dependent on whether or not you play Dire Frenzy or not, so you don't even want to play the boars every single time. Like, oh man, don't you just love my uncertainty with this deck? This is the main reason I made this deck is because I'm desperately trying to find something that I enjoy in this meta that is not Shaman, and sadly, this is where I have ended up, guys. So in case you're wondering my opinion about this, about these balance patches, I'm not necessarily upset that they happened. I'm just more so upset that the decks that I really liked just either gotten nerfed or the metagame is just not friendly to them anymore. Like, that's my... I would say the second point is more so the big reason why I don't enjoy this meta is because the meta that we have now just does not let me play the decks that I was enjoying beforehand. Naga Mage was one of the biggest decks that I really enjoyed, and unfortunately, Spite Lash Siren just doesn't exist anymore. But in any case, if you think that this is a funny meme, feel free to let me know in the comments below, because I want this deck to be good, but unfortunately, unless you're playing at the lower ranks, I don't think that Boar Hunter is even going to be able to get a win there. But there you guys have it. That's my take on the 5 best decks that you could play on the Legend ladder right now, as well as 5 other decks that you could easily use for your Legend climb. I'm going to be taking a break from doing gameplay content all the time. I'm going to be trying to fit in some more discussion type of content. So the next video that will be coming out sometime tomorrow is going to be discussion all about Nelly the Great Thresher. If you guys ever have any suggestions about topics you want me to cover, feel free to put them down in the comments below, and I'd love to get your guys' takes on different kinds of content you'd like to watch. Unfortunately, gameplay content is just very hard for me to do right now with me, number 1, not enjoying this meta, number 2, having some other projects that are popping up right now that I need to give my attention to. But I just want to let you guys know, and thank you again for supporting the videos and for still watching up until this point, because most people click away at this point. But in any case, thank you guys so much for making it to the end of this video, and we'll see you for the next one.